War photography now suggests speed, a shutter click, a transmitted file, an image seen worldwide before the smoke clears. The field we are judging began under the opposite conditions, when making one photograph near a battlefield could take several minutes, a wagon full of chemicals, and excellent luck. The key technology was wet plate collodion. A photographer coated a glass plate with chemicals, sensitized it, exposed it while still wet, and developed it before it dried, so the darkroom had to travel with the camera. That process produced sharp, information-rich negatives, but it was brutally inconvenient. Dust, heat, cold, broken glass, contaminated chemistry, and a few seconds of movement could ruin the result before the photographer even considered artillery fire. Exposure times also meant that combat itself was usually invisible. The camera could record fortifications, commanders, camps, prisoners, landscapes, and the dead, but charging soldiers became blur or simply vanished, leaving photographers to tell war through its edges and aftermath. So this is not a contest for the first person who pointed a lens toward an army. It is a comparison of individual photographers who made a sustained body of war work before fast cameras, and who changed what distant audiences believed a war photograph could do. The tests are demanding: access under real campaign conditions, technical control, the force and usefulness of the evidence, geographic and historical reach, influence on later visual reporting, and honest recognition of each photographer's limits. One more rule matters. A photograph is evidence, but never neutral evidence. Someone chooses where to stand, when to expose the plate, what to exclude, what to caption, and sometimes what to move, which means the greatest work in this field must survive scrutiny as well as admiration. Roger Fenton made the Crimean War look photographable at all. In 1855, he hauled a converted wine merchant's van through hostile terrain, worked through severe heat and illness, and returned with hundreds of usable negatives from a campaign that had become notorious for logistical incompetence. His pictures are controlled and astonishingly clear. Officers hold their poses, camps spread across hillsides, and distant batteries become part of a coherent military landscape. He established the visual grammar of the expedition, showing that a photographer could operate as a serious field professional, rather than a studio visitor. But Fenton's commission and audience favored an orderly war. He photographed no battlefield corpses, and even his famous road scattered with cannonballs exists in two versions that remind us how easily arrangement and documentation can overlap. He opened the road, yet stopped short of showing where it led. Matthew Brady understood scale better than any photographer of the American Civil War. He built a network, financed teams, secured access to national leaders, and attached a famous studio name to thousands of negatives that now form one of the central visual archives of the conflict. His New York display of photographs from Antietam forced urban viewers to confront dead soldiers with a directness that painting and newspaper prose could soften. Brady grasped that war photography was not only made in the field, it was edited, exhibited, sold, and made culturally unavoidable. The problem is authorship. Much of the fieldwork credited to Brady's brand was made by photographers such as Alexander Gardner and Timothy O'Sullivan, while Brady organized, purchased, and published. His enterprise was historic, but the goat here must be more than the proprietor of the most famous sign above the door. Timothy O'Sullivan supplied the eye that made several Civil War photographs feel almost modern. Still in his early 20s, he worked close to major campaigns and produced hard, staunchly intelligent images in which bodies, fences, earthworks, and empty distance explain what the battle did without theatrical decoration. His image, known as A Harvest of Death, is not merely graphic. The low horizon and scattered dead turn a field into a system of destruction, while his later government surveys proved that the same disciplined eye could make unfamiliar landscapes legible and unsettling. O'Sullivan's weakness is not quality, but control over the larger record. During the war, his negatives often moved through other men's studios and publications, and his military body of work remains concentrated in one conflict. He may be the strongest pure image maker among the American candidates, but the field asks for more than a handful of masterpieces. Alexander Gardner came closest to uniting authorship, narrative, and public impact. After leaving Brady, he opened his own Washington studio, and published Gardner's photographic sketchbook of the war, a 2-volume sequence of 100 photographs with descriptive texts and, importantly, credits for the photographers who made them. Gardner photographed Abraham Lincoln, the aftermath of Antietam and Gettysburg, the execution of the assassination conspirators, and the expanding western United States. His work forms a remarkably complete visual argument about a nation at war and the political order that emerged from it. Yet the strongest rival carries the clearest ethical warning. At Gettysburg, the same dead soldier was moved to a more dramatic position, and a rifle was added to the scene later called Home of a Rebel Sharpshooter. Gardner created the era's most coherent war book, but part of that coherence was manufactured, and almost all of it belonged to one war. Felix Beato is the GOAT of war photography before cameras got fast. His claim rests not on one perfect image, but on a career that repeatedly carried the wet plate camera into new wars, new empires, and new visual problems across Europe, South Asia, China, Japan, Korea, and Northeast Africa. Beato learned expedition photography with James Robertson and photographed the Crimean War, then traveled to India after the rebellion of 1857. At Lucknow, he did not merely collect picturesque ruins. He built broad, detailed views of shattered places, so viewers could inspect damage almost as if walking through it. Inside the Secundrabad, where British and Allied forces had killed large numbers of defenders, Beato photographed human bones arranged across the courtyard months after the fighting. The image is powerful evidence of violence, and equally powerful evidence that the photographer could construct the appearance of immediacy. That contradiction followed him to China in 1860, where he joined the British and French expedition during the Second Opium War. He transported fragile plates through a moving military campaign and photographed the Taku forts after they were stormed, when the scene was still physically raw. The interior view of the Taku North Fort is one of the defining photographs of early war reporting. Dead Chinese defenders occupy the foreground, damaged defenses lead the eye inward, and the camera's clinical detail denies the comfortable distance that Fenton's Crimea had preserved. Beato also worked in sequence. He recorded approaches, fortifications, breaches, interiors, ruined guns, and the line of retreat, claiming separate plates to function together as a visual account of an operation, rather than a loose album of impressive scenes. That serial method is the decisive technical and editorial leap. Because the camera could not freeze the assault, Beato reconstructed the battle through geography and consequence, where forces entered, what resistance remained, and where the defeated army withdrew. In Beijing, he photographed the Imperial Summer Palace shortly before British forces burned much of the complex in retaliation for the torture and death of prisoners. The pictures became records of architecture on the edge of destruction, but they were also made from inside the invading coalition that caused that destruction. This is why Beato cannot be treated as a neutral witness drifting above history. His access depended on imperial armies, his captions often reflected their assumptions, and his camera could turn conquest into spectacle. The same access that made the archive possible also narrowed the viewpoint from which it was made. After China, Beato established a major studio in Yokohama. He photographed Japanese streets, landscapes, occupations, and social types, then sold albums whose prints were often hand-colored by local artists, helping shape how foreign audiences imagined a country that had only recently opened to wider outside contact. He also photographed the political machinery surrounding war, negotiators, commanders, garrisons, and occupied cities. A portrait of Prince Kung after the Beijing settlement is not battlefield action, but it shows the endpoint that many war photographs omit, when violence becomes a signed agreement and a new balance of power. Beato's range continued through the Shimonoseki campaign in Japan, the United States expedition to Korea in 1871, and the Sudan campaign in the 1880s. Few early photographers repeatedly rebuilt a working practice around so many armies, climates, languages, and political systems. Gardner remains the stronger rival for a single, offered account of one national war, and his decision to credit photographers in the sketchbook was more responsible than the studio branding common around Brady. But Beato wins this exact field because he made war photography mobile, geographically global, and adaptable across radically different conflicts. The title, therefore, comes with a warning, not a halo. Beato showed that a slow camera could make distant war visible through ruins, bodies, routes, portraits, and aftermath, while also proving that every visible fact arrives inside a frame chosen by someone with access and allegiance. His GOAT status matters because modern war photography inherited both halves of that achievement: the power to preserve evidence and the obligation to question who arranged the view.